Hello, SOC 115 class. So for this subject, Sociology of Disaster, we are really going to talk about a lot of disasters here. So disasters actually cannot be controlled. However, we can prepare ourselves for such events, hopefully. So for this lesson, we are going to cover these key concepts: what disaster is, sociologists in disaster, and sociology of disaster. Now, disaster is the concept per se is a serious disruption of the functioning of a community or a society, which involves widespread human, material, economic, or environmental loss and impacts. So you see the keywords here underlined: widespread. So it's almost all in the society are affected, and there is much loss and impacts on the people, so that such loss exceeds the ability of the affected community or society to cope using its own resources. Usually, there is a need for outside assistance, outside of the community. Now, these losses and impacts were experienced by this disaster, the human-made disaster, the Marawi change in 2017, and as well as this natural disaster created by Sendong in year 2011. These two different disasters, because one is human-made, the other one is natural. These two have different origins, but the disaster impacts and losses are similar, that brought destruction on this human, material, economic, environmental aspects. So going back to the definition again, to remind us that the disaster will be of this magnitude. The loss and the impacts are widespread, exceeding the ability to cope of that particular community or society affected by the disaster, be it human-made or man-made. So the human-made disaster, this one, in 2017, both have created high death toll, and the people who survive, so there were deaths, and those who survived, many of them became IDPs. There's loss of livelihood, loss of properties, loss of electricity, and passable roads. So you can just imagine this. In a while, we're going to discuss what IDPs is. These two different types of disasters exceeds, yes, the ability of the affected community to cope. So the internally displaced persons, or IDPs, these are persons or groups of persons who are forced or obliged to flee or to leave their homes or places of habitual residence as a result of, or to avoid the effects of, armed conflict, situations of generalized violence, violations of human rights, natural or human-made disasters. So all of this may push away people from a particular community to move out, and hence they will become IDPs in other communities. But these people have not crossed an internationally recognized state border. Like, for example, in the Marawi Shades, they are not in Marawi, but they are in the neighboring municipalities, barangays, neighboring cities of Marawi. And they become displaced persons. But it's internal. Now, sociology as our subject matter, your major, by definition, we know it focuses on the group, not the individual. So these individuals who are in the group respond to disasters in the context of social structure rooted in the group consciousness. Okay, remember social structure? It's something that is composed of different parts, and each part functions for the whole. Now, the groups also exhibit an emergent social structure that is drawn from collective social consciousness. So, these individuals and these groups of people, they are part of that social structure. And there is that collective social consciousness wherein there may be slight differences in what people can remember, but there is that collective social consciousness wherein there is similarity. Oh, these people share similar knowledge as to what transpired in that particular disaster. So, the collective social consciousness is a set of shared beliefs, ideas, attitudes, and knowledge that are common to a social group or society. We have the local emergency manager. He is in charge with coordinating mitigation, planning, and response activities within his or her community. So let us call that person the local emergency manager during disaster in the community. That is how it is to have the disaster response. Now, for sociological conceptualization of disaster, the community is set as the locus of analysis. It has to be the community as a whole, not individual alone. Okay, the community as the locus of analysis. It is based on a social unit. It is based on a social unit that has cross-national and cross-cultural applicability. So everyone is involved. It's a social unit also that has the capacity and resources to activate a response to disaster. Now, disasters are also societal phenomena in that they impact on the larger system. For example, societal, economic, social structure. What do sociologists study in disaster? John, can you tone down your voice? John, John, can you tone down your voice? I'm recording. So, sociologists do not study the natural or the human-made disaster agents. They conduct research on the disruption of everyday social activity resulting from the potential or actual impact of such agent. So, the sociologists do not deal with the disaster agents, but on the disruption that the disaster agents have caused on the people, be it natural or human-made disaster agent that cause disruption of everyday social activity. There comes the sociologist to study that. When a disaster agent is potentially or actually impacting a community, the sociological question include what social structure changes will occur. When will this occur? Will they be temporary or permanent? What variables are associated with what is found in answer to these questions? Okay, take note of these questions, which are very important during this event wherein you are there as a sociologist. So there is that emergent social structure. Emergent because it's not there before the disaster, which will somehow emit, or there will be outcome of altruistic norms and roles. When you say altruistic, it's that doing of something for other people. And then there is that initial social bonding among victims and responders. These are actually very much visible when you are there after the disaster, and you get to observe this amongst the victims. So the social structure, there is that cycle of, or there is that constant occurrence of deconstruction and then reconstruction of the social structure, because every society has an existing social structure. When that is disrupted, then there will be an emergent social structure to cope the particular event that has transpired on the society. Okay, to more perfectly meet the needs, so there will be an emergent social structure. Now, there is either precipitous event, definition of the situation, adapted alternative, which it can be emergent or institutionalized. Of course, at the onset, it is emergent, but later on, it will become institutionalized social structure. So this actually somehow will bring about rapid social change. Now, the disaster sociologists, or those that study disaster sociology, okay, study social structure, the change under specialized circumstances. It's specialized because it's just a disaster, and hopefully it will just pass. So, again, we do not study disasters. We study complex organizations during normal time, yes, before the precipitous event. But that's already complex, right? And then we are there to determine why mitigation is embraced or resisted. We study the social structure process occurring in response to the precipitous event. We call the disaster event as a precipitous event. We studied the altered social structure in the aftermath of the impact of a disaster agent when it causes widespread destruction and distress. Destruction on what's physical, and then distress among the people. And not just people, even the animals. Okay, destruction of livelihood. Okay. So, because it has become altered, the emergent social structure. So, sociology of disaster is the sociological or social scientific study of the social structure, adjustment preceding and following the precipitating event or disaster agent. So you cannot be lost for the concept now, precipitating event or disaster agent. That's all in all disaster. So there is that operative social structure prior to the event. And then the critical mass of both victims and responders within a community. And then after the disaster transpired, whether natural or human-made, there's that adherence to social structure that meets the emergent needs of the community. So, all in all, you see this before, during, after a disaster. Okay, there is that social structure already there prior, and then at the event of disaster, precipitous event, human made or natural, so the critical mass of both victims and responders within a community, you'll see them there coping, and they cannot anymore cope. So there is that adherence to social structure that meets the emergent needs of the community that you see after that disaster. If you have noticed the disasters that uh, were shown on television, or you may have uh, studied, or you may have watched or read in the newspaper, those disasters that transpired, you can see the help pouring in, coming in from outside of the particular community, coming in from neighboring cities, provinces, at the national level, and even international aid will arrive to help the community that has undergone so much loss and impacts out of the human-made or natural disaster.